Okay, so my point was to give a more thorough explanation to why these things are happening. I saw this video. I'm not taking credit. Credit the creator here, and you can see this edit, which shows Doja Cat responding to Satanist allegations. And what I want to explore in this video is why or how this came to be.
I'm sorry, when the fuck did I say that I was a Satanist?
Bitch, I said what I said.
It's really tacky and annoying and discredits a lot of the hard work that I've put in.
I don't care, I paint the town red.
It's not real when you see a fucking CGI dragon fly by a screen that's not a real dragon. But people really feel that way.
She a devil, she a bad little bitch, she a...
Okay, do you guys remember that back in the 90s? No, actually, let's pull it back. 90s, 2000s, 2010s. Okay, so starting during the 80s, metal was quite popular with the kids, but there was the movement, for against rock music because it was during the peak of the Satanic Panic. People just thought that everybody was worshiping the devil, and also the bands were feeding into this using Christian imagery and also satanic imagery, or whatever the public considers satanic. So the Rolling Stones had an album cover with a goat head, like a boiled goat head or something like that. Black Sabbath, and all of these other bands that just kind of fed into the idea of Satanism, whatever the parents thought that their children were into. These bands would just play into those tropes and use them in their music and in their artistry. It was all fake, obviously. There's no such thing as Satanism. Not really. There's LaVeyan Satanism that was also invented in the 60s because of the earlier Satanic Panic during the hippie era, where hippies were actually just rich affluent kids who were rejecting basically their parents' worldview, and they wanted to protest and hang out with the poor kids because they thought the poor kids were cool, and they were actually the poor kids were the ones who knew the truth and stuff like that. So the rich kids were we're gonna rebel and whatever, and we're gonna wear dirty clothes and walk barefoot and whatever. So yeah, that's how the hippies came to be. They weren't they're rich kids. Anyway, so their parents got super panicked, and this guy, Anton LaVey, was you know what? This is funny as fuck. I'm just gonna make my own church and call it the Church of Satanism. And we're gonna have a Bible and we'll have rituals and everything. And it was kind of a gimmicky kind of thing, but it kind of became serious in the sense that people who reject the idea of organized religion but can have fun with it became members of the Satanic Church, which was actually something that fascinated me when I was in high school. I was really into LaVey because of that. I thought it was cool, and it was because it was tongue-in-cheek. So if you get it, you get it. Anyway, and fast forward to the 90s, right? When kind of after the peak of the Satanic Panic, when people started to calm down, we have the grunge era, which was also kind of basically another version of punk, but for the 90s kids. And it became super popular, and then it kind of bled into the mainstream with more digestible bands like Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins and stuff like that. They're the more popular ones, and also Nirvana, even though Nirvana was pretty rough compared to Smashing Pumpkins or Pearl Jam, but somehow because Kurt Cobain was so charismatic, they became popular and mainstream. That was not the intention. That was an accident, just because Kurt was charming, unintentionally so. And it kind of sparked an interest in rock music in the mainstream, which continued on in the 2000s when we get the new metal and all those crazy ass bands. Yeah. Okay, so after the 90s and the early 2000s get like the new metal scene and whatever, which is kind of like freaky in a way. It's another kind of punk type of attitude, but with a broified twist to it, so to speak, because think about it, like even the bands, like I think apart from Stone Temple Pilots, who are amazing by the way, but I think that they're more like the macho kind from the grunge scene, like maybe Temple of Dog, I don't know. So there are like a few bands that have like this kind of like a little bit of a machismo thing going on, whereas the other ones, even Pearl Jam, like even though its name means literally sperm, I think they had like this feminine, sensitive side to them, like Smashing Pumpkins and Kurt Cobain and whatever. Like I know I'm just repeating the same names. There are more grunge bands out there. Just look them up. But they were all like, because they were like into like issues, like important issues, they could be more on the sensitive side. So they weren't like overly masculine, and sometimes they could accept like feminine elements to the music. And also like you had people like Courtney Love who kept the grunge sound within a feminist framework, and it worked. Like grunge for girls works, you know what I mean? But when you get to the 2000s and it's like the new metal era, even though you have like bands like, I don't know, Linkin Park, who have like a little bit of a feminine vibe to them. Also like, yeah, because I remember Soundgarden, Chester Bennington, he was always like a big Soundgarden fan, and obviously Chris Cornell became his best friend, and we all know the story. Sad. I don't like to think about it too much because it's like, it's so sad when you see that's a bromance for the ages, you know what I mean? That's a bromance for the ages. Yeah, if you don't know the story, look it up and you're gonna understand what I mean. It's always like Romeo and Juliet, but bromance version, if you know what I mean. And then with the new metal, you get like these a little bit of macho bro type of metal, new metal. Like I said, apart from Linkin Park, and probably there were maybe a few other bands that were like in the same vibe, like for the girls, kind of, because girls were into Linkin Park a lot. Guys too, but like girls were really into it. You could tell it was like, it's like sensitive music. And these old bands like, Papa Roach and Fred Durst and Jonathan Davis and all these weird ass people, they became super, super popular during the 2000s because it came up like Woodstock 99 was kind of like not even the peak. I think it was the beginning of their success. You know what I mean? Because, yeah, they were riding that 90s wave, but going to 2000s, like, there is not a single person out there who didn't like Nookie and other, very new metal anthems and whatever, and everybody was like into Korn and, But what also came out from that scene, because obviously as in the 70s you had punk on one side, like the violence and the masculinity and the whatever, then on the other side you had like the feminine, theatrical and sensitive side of goth. And I think that we needed that in the 2000s as well. So as opposed to the new metal, we had the emo kids and the scene kids and whatever. And don't get me wrong, I know these themes, these genres, they usually develop in the background. So probably like the earliest iterations of emo probably started within the goth movement. I am sure of it. But they evolved, you know, and they came into their true like butterfly form in the 2000s. And when you got like maybe late 90s but early 2000s, and then you get the scene kids, which are basically emo but not like deep depression sadness emo. They're more like, oh, I like the fashion and the style and the music, but we're just gonna be like, you know, quirky kids that don't care about anything. And of course, because it was like linked and influenced by the goth movement, of course you had like all these dark imagery associated with it, you know, like coffins and skulls and ravens and all that shit. That was also part of the goth culture. And also goth as well evolved. Like goth is something that existed and still exists to this day, even though it's not popular as it was like in the 70s, but it's still something that never died, and we have to acknowledge that. But what I'm talking about is like mainstream trends, right? So it was mainstream to be into dark satanic like imagery, and because of all these elements that were very popular in the 2000s and 2010, late 90s and early 2000s, then in the 2010s, pop music starts using all of these dark elements, and you get actually a very interesting combination of goth fashion element and kind of like with an pop emo twist to them. Like if you look up goth music, even though it's like very eclectic, goth music has a certain theatrical feel to it. Like people who play like in goth bands, they don't even sing with their regular voices. They usually have like create these ethereal sounding voices to express their music. Like you can look up, I don't know, Susie and the Banshees, or like even, I know they're not goth, but you can even like, I would say proto-emo, The Cure, like even though like, you know, the voice that they did. Even Joy Division is not technically goth, it's post-punk, but even there you can see the start of the no, actually, because it was like late actually, but you can see the influence of goth, of the theatrical goth voice, you know, with Joy Division. At the center of the city, and now we're here. And I was like, they got like the ethereal vibe going. And yeah, so everything was supposed to be creepy like that. And it's funny that in 2010s, everyone was like into goth imagery or like fetish imagery, and they got that's, and also I think there is a subgenre of goth, if I'm not mistaken, that's like fetish goth. So of course, like this was a big influence into the mainstream version of it. Like think Lady Gaga's Monster, Fame and Fame Monster albums and stuff like that, and like even Rihanna stuff back then. Beyonce was on the bandwagon, Madonna, who else? Top of my head, like even Christina Aguilera had a song that was like I'm Not Myself Tonight or something like that, and was like really super into like fetish, gothy fetish things. So what I mean is that all of these could have been considered satanic, and some people did, but it was so mainstream that it was like, oh yeah, it's cool to wear skulls now, you know? And then we oversaturated that for such a long time that in the end, we got sick of it. So we came back to like pastels and flowers and all these like bright, fresh, cute things. And now we're in the midst of another satanic panic where Doja Cat cannot use the word devil in her song without people saying, "Oh my God, you're a Satanist. You just admitted to being a Satanist." And I'm like, and she was like in the interview, you know, the interview. I'm like, take a chill pill, people. Take a chill pill. There's no conclusion to this, but it's interesting to see how cyclical everything is. And if you guys know more about the history of this, yeah, there's always a chance to have a conversation in the comments or whatever, or not. But this is just what I know from the top of my head, obviously. Yeah, thanks.
When the fuck did I say that I was a Satanist?